the moral of the Live More lectures is generally never give up. And so many times in what we're doing, we're faced with some dilemmas. And through some of my challenges, I've been faced with that dilemma quite a lot. And so I'm going to go through some of my adventures with you and kind of let you know what on earth drove me to do such crazy things. So it all began, I actually was a school teacher. And I was very happy teaching 11 to 18-year-olds. I was a PE teacher, 13 paid weeks holiday a year. I was crazy to give that up. But the reality was that I still wanted to do more. I wanted to still have adventures and travel and go and do things. And so after my mum thought she had cracked it, got me safely off in a sensible job, nice career, I said, I'm going to try something new. Her face just dropped. And I decided to go and retrain, and I headed to UKSA on the Isle of Wight, and I actually retrained in water sports first. I had this image of a red Baywatch swimsuit running down the beach, windsurfing, kayaking, hanging out. I'd been teaching 5 years before I decided on this career change. I decided that my Baywatch days were a little limited compared to some of the younger people that were training with me. So I then went into yachting, thinking that maybe yachting would have a bit more longevity as a career. And that actually led to me working on yachts. And I started at the bottom. I served drinks, I scrubbed decks, I cleaned toilets, I cleaned seasick off the decks, and worked my way up until I was stood at the back of the boat telling other people to clean decks and scrub seasick. And it was while I was doing this that I saw the Global Challenge Race, Che Blythe's idea that everybody could sail around the world, given the opportunity. And I thought, that's quite cool. And they set off. 10 months later, they came back and they had the biggest party you have ever seen. Fireworks, they were drinking all night, partying in the streets, and I was like, cool, I want some of that. And so 2004, I worked my way to get to be a skipper of the Global Challenge Race. 12 identical boats, 12 professional skippers. I was the only female, and on each boat was 17 paying crew, amateur sailors. Some were going to find themselves, some were going to lose themselves, some were going to do God knows what. 10 months sailing around the world. My job was to get them to the finish line safely. And that was a teaching opportunity. We learned about sailing. I learned a lot about conflict management, man management. And it was on this voyage that Che Blythe in Cape Town, because what we'd do, we'd spend 5, 6, 7 weeks at sea. We'd arrive somewhere new, have the biggest party ever, forget how bad it was, get back on the boat and go and do it again. That was basically how we went around the world. And we got to Cape Town and we'd succeeded, we'd survived the Southern Ocean. From there we just had to go to America, back to Europe, job done. And Che Blythe was a massive inspiration, and he was like, you need to be looking forward. What are you going to do next? This is a stepping stone. Do not think that this is everything. And we were thinking, God, we just want to get to the end. I hadn't really thought beyond getting home. And he said to me, it's only a matter of time before a woman follows in my footsteps. I was thinking, to the bar, to drink the whiskey. And what he meant was actually to sail that same route non-stop around the world on your own. I kind of smiled politely, thinking, whatever, and set off to Boston from Cape Town. 7,000 miles with my crew, who were all kind of getting a bit better now, and they questioned every single decision, every single tactic, every single strategy. And across from Cape Town to Boston, you get the doldrums in the middle, hot, sun beating down, no wind. And I thought, do you know what? You might have a point. Get rid of the 17 people and do it on my own. It might be easier. So I got to Boston and I said, I'm up for it. How do I do it? And he said, well, you need to go and find a sponsor and make it happen. I thought, oh. I actually thought he was just going to make it all happen. But there began my experience of meetings in the boardroom, getting sponsorship and convincing people that you could deliver something exciting. But it was just 3 months after the Global Challenge Race in 2005 that I set off on exactly the same boat, minus the 17 people, and went to do the same trip again non-stop. Now, my sponsor was an insurance company, and the small detail I may have overlooked was that I'd never actually sailed on my own before. Until that day, I dropped the crew off outside Plymouth and I sailed towards the Lizard Lighthouse where the little man was with his stopwatch. I'd never actually sailed on my own at all. And so I literally just burst into tears. I was like, what am I going to do? And the last thing that Che Bly said to me was, go and enjoy yourself. You've got 27,000 miles to learn how to do it, and don't cry about it. So I put the kettle on, made a cup of tea, and decided that everything would be all right in the end. If in doubt, have a cup of tea. And I spent 178 days on my own having a cup of tea every time I thought that something was really scary. That was a lot of cups of tea, I can assure you. And what you learn is that 24 hours a day with yourself, 7 days a week for 6 months, you're actually not that funny when you're on your own. I learned an awful lot about myself. I had this huge emotional roller coaster, severe highs, euphoric highs with no one to celebrate with, utter tears, devastation, shock, with nobody to pick you up with, and it was in the Southern Ocean where you're crashing into the waves. 6 months because I went what's considered the wrong way round, so against the prevailing winds and currents. So you spend your whole time zigzagging, tacking, predominantly sailing in completely the wrong direction, which is quite demoralising. And I battled these huge waves of the Southern Ocean coming towards me, and I looked over my shoulder and thought, there's a reason only 4 men have done this before, because everyone else goes the other way round. And I thought, I'm going to do that too. If I get to the end of this, I'm going to go the other way, because that's what everyone else does. Call me a slow learner. But I decided on that trip that that's what I wanted to do. And I came back, and everybody thought I was completely mad. To survive 6 months on my own, I then wanted to go back out there and do it on my own again. But if you want to sail the right way, you're then putting yourself with some of the best sailors in the world. And the ultimate race to go the right way around the world is what's called the Vendee Globe. Every 4 years, solo, unassisted, non-stop around the world. That's where I went to next. Now, the boat that I'd done the Global Challenge race on, the same boat that I went around the world the wrong way in, was 45 tons of steel. It was indestructible. It could go through anything, and I felt really safe. I traded this in. It was a bit like having an HGV license. I was driving a massive bus, and I swapped it for a Formula 1 car. I got an 8-ton carbon fibre, high-profile racing machine. Did I know what I was doing? Of course not. Yet again, I was setting off on something that I knew nothing about. An open 60, designed to surf huge waves at 30 knots and have the thrill of your life, but the right way round the world. This was exciting. My first race in this boat, this is a start line, and as you can see, I'm the yellow one, quite a distance from the line. I was a bit scared. I was lining up with some of the best sailors in the world that I'd read about in papers, seen in magazines, and here I was on the same type of boat doing the same type of thing. How cool, but how scary. I had not really much control, not much confidence in myself, but this race was from Plymouth to Boston, transatlantic race, and I had to finish to qualify for my place to do the Vendée Globe to sail around the world. So I had to finish no matter what, but this was my first race on my own in a boat that was on the edge of control as far as I was concerned. So I realised that I had to really up my game. The Vendée Globe in 2008 was the biggest one that we've had. It had the most boats, the most number of new boats, 30 skippers, an amazing group that are famous for magazines, for sailing for 18 years of doing this, and I've done it for, 18 months? And thought I could stand alongside them. Now that was the biggest shock to the system, but that first race really made me realise I really had to put the effort in. The sailing bit is relatively easy. The preparation beforehand is where all the effort is. And I had the help of my university. I went to university in Leeds, and they offered to run all my programs. So physically, I had to really work on my fitness, starting with core stability to avoid injuries. Because when you're on your own, you're your own medic, your own engineer, your own mechanic, your own weather expert. You do everything. So the last thing you want is illness or injury. So I spent a lot of time working gradually until I was strong enough to manage what I had to do. Also, some of the skills needed work. I'd kind of made it up how to climb a mast on my own. Because normally when you're on a boat, everybody sails the boat and somebody pulls you up the mast for you to go and do a job. When you're on your own, you kind of have to make that happen yourself. And I'd kind of been making it up, thinking, well, this must be what they do. For some reason, in Britain, we're really loath to ask people for advice or help. Eventually, I got the hint that I needed to know about these things, and I recruited a canyoning expert because they are specialists in single rope technique. And I hung around loads of rafters with loads of ropes, testing different equipment, and then we went to the boat and actually did it in place. And even he had to admit that swinging around a mast on a moving boat completely changes the dynamic. And it is a scary thing, especially like me when you're scared of heights. Small detail, but you need to suffer to appreciate the good bits. Psychology was also a really big thing. In my preparation, I really kept shunning away from psychology, sports psychology. I don't need to speak to anybody, I'm fine. Go down the gym, lift heavy weights, that must be what I need to do. Eventually, I got bullied, and I would just go and talk to somebody. And I went and saw the sports psychologist, and he knew I didn't really want to be there. I had this image that every time I needed to do something on the boat, I'd have to go to my happy place, like Johnny Wilkinson. And I was thinking, I just don't have time for this. And before I knew it, 30 minutes later, I stopped talking, and he said, well, you have told me a lot. I was like, how did you make that happen? He'd only asked me one question, and I'd talked at him non-stop. And I learned an awful lot about myself over the period of a year, doing the work with the psychologist, about my default setting being quite negative. I was very good at telling people what I didn't want to happen. I didn't want to come last. I didn't want to let people down. I didn't want to embarrass myself. I didn't want to let my team down. I didn't want to fail. There was lots of negativity, but I couldn't actually say what I did want to happen. And I found it really hard to change my natural setting to being very positive, having positive language. I do want to do well. I am going to go fast. I am going to have a good time. I am going to... It's very difficult to change what's naturally in your makeup. And that's what I really had to work at. And also learning how other people's conversations can influence me. A lot of the time, because you get so much information through the internet now, that people following the race could actually have information before I have it. And if you have a conversation with your shore team or your partner, your friends or family, and they're saying, oh, you're not going as fast as certain, they're going faster than you, or they've changed their sail, and they've had this. And you're like, that's really not helping me. I needed to really concentrate on the things I could do something about and not be distracted by things that I could do nothing about. So that was a really big step forwards, and I probably learned more in the psychology needed to do what I did rather than the sailing. That was my biggest advancement. And also the French. The French dominate offshore sailing, and you can't beat time on the water. You just got to be out there doing it, exposing yourself. And I thought, I'm going to do as well as the French. I'm going to get a French coach on board. So I went and got a French coach on board. He beasted me on the boat, really. And I'm very happy to say that I will spend time on the water and push myself. But it's quite hard to make yourself do a manoeuvre again and again and again. You need almost an outside influence to say, and again, and you did this wrong. And having the pressure of someone making notes behind you, you think, oh. And we must have gone out and sailed for hours. I used to come in with my arms just hanging, thinking I can't actually lift another sail because I'm finished. And that's what I just needed, to be pushed outside my comfort zone. And he was French, so it must have been having a knock-on effect, because if you're going to beat the French, you've got to beat them with their own goods. And it worked, because this was the start of the Vendée Globe. November 2008, And that's the yellow boat near the front. I finally got it right. All that hard work paid off. In fact, so much so it shocked everybody. And I think there was a conspiracy. I'm not anti-French, but I do think there was a conspiracy between the French and the Brits, because they changed the VHF channel for us to hear the information on. And so I didn't have the same VHF channel. I didn't know what time we had. I didn't know the countdowns. So I kind of got really disorientated in the start line. And your crew are with you and they jump off at 10 minutes. So my guys had jumped off into the rib and then you're kind of left on your own. And then you're like, I really need the toilet then. It's always a nervous toilet time. And I'm kind of jigging there thinking, oh, and I don't really know where to go fast, when to go slow. And I had no idea of the countdown. Now, the problem is, yeah, great if you're over early, you get lots of publicity for your sponsor, but you look like a real sado because you've got 27,000 miles to go. So waiting an extra second at the start line really isn't going to make the difference. So you want to get a good start, but not push your luck. So because I didn't have an idea of the time, next to me was a French boat, PRB, Vincent Rieu, and he won the previous edition of the race. I was like, excellent, he's French, and he knows what he's doing, I'm going to follow him. So literally, I copied him. As he speeded up, I speeded up. As he slowed down, I slowed down, and I just kind of zigzagged my way until before I knew it, my guys in the rib were just going mental. I was thinking, God, I know they're pleased I'm leaving, but that really is a little bit upsetting. But they were like, yeah, and literally, first 4 boats across the line, I was one of them. With all the French rock stars, I was like, bring it on. If we could just stop the race now, I'd look really good. But no, I had 3 more months to go. And actually, we headed off, because it's November in the Bay of Biscay, notorious for big storms, and we headed out into 50 knots that first night. So you knew something bad was going to happen, and you think, right, there's a whole world to go around. It doesn't make a difference in the next few hours. But of course, you're pushing because you can see everybody else. And that next morning, 6 of the boats had actually retired. So 4 years planning and preparation, massive commitment of time, effort and money. And they were going back to the dock, not having done the adventure. So that really brought it home to me that this was a really big mission. And 99 days later, 30 boats started, only 11 boats finished. That's the kind of attrition rate for the Vendée Globe, just because you can't have any outside assistance. And of those 11 boats, I crossed the line in 6th place. Now, 99 days, and I finished 2.5 hours behind the boat in front. Not that I was bitter and twisted and upset about that. He was a Brit as well, the guy in front. Literally, we'd been in the Southern Ocean together for ages. We were at Cape Horn together, and we were really racing up the Atlantic, and we got to the doldrums, and the wind just shut down for me, and he just sneaked through. And literally, with 3,000 miles left to go, I lost 300 miles in a day like that. So I worked really hard to get it back and finished 36 miles behind him, which was fantastic racing, but obviously I would have preferred it the other way around. But if somebody with 30 boats on the start line, with some of the best sailors in the world, had said to me, I'll give you 6th place now, I would have bitten their arm off. So top 10, I would have bitten their arm off. So to get that, I was quite chuffed, as you can see. It is an amazing feeling. And that was ticking the box of being the only woman to sail single-handed non-stop in both directions around the world. And we had this big joke that one of the red tops would have, Dee goes both ways. Sailing wasn't that high profile, I wasn't that famous, unfortunately. But the records were a bit of a theme then, and I finished that February 2009, and in June that year I went for the Round Britain and Ireland speed record. And I was hedging my bets a little bit, because they have records and they recognise female and overall records. So just to make sure I'd get something, I had a female crew and we went for the overall record. And 6 days we worked really hard around Britain and Ireland, and actually finished in weather similar to this, where we were sunbathing and it was beautiful and we were really having to work quite hard. But had an absolute blast, 4 of us. And it took us longer to recover from that 6 days of effort, getting the record, than it did from sailing around the world. And that's like the difference of a marathon and a sprint. And we all agreed. Sam Davis was another Vendee Globe skipper that was with me on that. And we both agreed that actually it took more out of us because you're not wanting to let anyone down. And we literally had a look at it and we were like, right, we can't take longer than 6 days. We're only taking 6 days of food. We're only taking this. Really stripped it back that if it wasn't going to happen, we were going to be hungry. So thankfully, we were very smiley, happy people. But it's not always easy offshore sailing. If it was easy, then everybody would be doing it. It's not without its hazards. A couple of really bad horror stories from the Vendee Globe does bring it home to you what environment you're in. And this is Jan Elias. He was a skipper of Generali, and he was just south of Australia. Now, you can call it fortunate in his location. When you travel the Southern Ocean, you are in vast areas of ocean where rescue is weeks away because there's not the traffic flow. Your closest point of rescue is a fellow competitor because we're the ones that are there. The furthest you are from land is a place called Point Nemo, and that's 2,000 miles from land, which you're looking at 14 days before anyone's going to get out there and come and find you. So it really is remote, and so to have his credit, his incident happened just as he was south of Australia. So for him, it was very, very fortunate. But he was surfing down big waves, and he was working on the front of his boat. Surfed down a big wave, lots of water over the deck, and he ends up over the front of the boat. Now, you learn very quickly that when you're on your own on the boat, it's an absolute waste of time unless you're clipped on. There isn't any room for heroics, because nobody's going to swing around and come back and get you. So he was clipped on, but hanging over the front of his boat. Adrenaline fueled, he gets himself back on, gets himself back to the back of the boat, down below, makes a phone call and says, I need to get off this boat. Now, the last thing any skipper wants to do is leave their boat, but he knew something was pretty bad. And at that point then, he had run out of adrenaline. He was just sat frozen, but out of reach of his medical kit. Now, we all have loads of stuff on board because we leave with everything that we need. Medical kit, food, spares, clothes, everything. And the reason we are on our own without 15 people sat along the side leaning out, like you see in the pictures, is because we stack everything. We move everything down below. All our food, anything that's heavy, and our medical kit is really heavy. So it's all thrown in the stack. And when we heard about this incident, all of us were thinking, where's our medical kit? There he is. We know he's got a problem, and he's out of reach of his medical kit, so no drugs. All the party drugs that we're allowed to carry were out of reach. So suddenly I was like, where's my medical kit? Because we're on the same boat doing the same thing in the same bit of water. And so I actually had a bit of a rearrangement of my medical kit and had a quick handy bag of exciting party drugs close to hand and then moved the rest of it away. And actually the rules have changed. It's evolving the whole time as we learn lessons, as with everything. And now it's a rule that the medical kit has to be within a metre of the hatch. 48 hours and the Australian Navy came out to rescue him. He had broken his pelvis and 2 vertebrae in his spine and his femur. I mean, that is mega, but it shows what the body can do, fueled by adrenaline. And he was very grateful for the drugs and treatment he got then. But horrible thought, and he abandoned his boat, but we have trackers on them. His crew went out to go and find the boat, but they never found it. So I guess that's housing a few penguins or something. So that was a bit traumatic, and we all, as the rest of the fleet, kind of recover from the shock that we've heard of somebody else, a fellow competitor, going through something so horrible. And then we get the next load of bad news as we approach Cape Horn. The little white triangle down the bottom of the picture is actually an open 60 yacht, but upside down. And just, it shows in the picture how insignificant we are compared to the size of other shipping. Again, if you can call it that, it's fortuitous that this happened at Cape Horn. Notorious bit of water. What happens is the whole Southern Ocean squeezes through a really small gap between the Antarctic shelf and South America. The seabed comes up, so big waves are created, and because there's been no land stopping this momentum of water, it really builds up a massive rate, and you can almost guarantee there's going to be a storm there. So it's notorious in a sailor's mind anyway, almost guaranteed bad weather. He makes a phone call to his shore team, and the last thing he says is, I think I've got a problem with the keel, and that's the last of the conversation they heard. His keel normally is sticky out with a big bulb of lead at the bottom, and the big bulb of lead fell off, and so his boat fell over. Now he's inside, and you can see all the sails, all the ropes and that swinging around in the water. For him to get out of his boat, he has to swim out, not get tangled up, and get himself onto the deck. He's at 57 degrees south, so it's almost being like at the top of Scotland, but in the southern hemisphere. Pretty cold, pretty wild, and he's obviously a little bit scared. He's French though, so in good style. The big ship came and located him. Because of his location, a spotter plane goes out, which is why we've all got these great photos. Spotter plane goes out, yeah, we know where he is. Cargo ship comes by, he can do nothing because he's so big and the conditions are quite bad, so he kind of just stands by. Another competitor, the closest competitor, goes to his position and he's sailing around in circles. Now he's inside thinking, how do I let anybody know I'm okay? Because all the aerials are now in the water. So he thought, I'll try some things. So he gets a flare, and we have through hull fittings for how fast we're going. So he takes that out and he puts a flare through the hole in the boat, which sounds like not a bad idea, until he let us know that all he managed to do was fill the inside of the boat where he was with smoke. So he nearly gassed himself. So memo to all of us, don't light a flare inside your boat, funnily enough. So he got a piece of red cloth and kind of dangled it through the hole in the boat, and then he just had to guess. So he just decided to swim onto his hull, and as luck would have it, the other boat was going around in circles going, I'm here, trying to communicate. Lessons learned from that one. We now all have to carry aerials that fit through the hull watertight, should we invert, so that we can still communicate with satellite phones, VHFs, etc. None of us really want to test them. I'll leave it to a Frenchman to test it. But that was another rescue, and here I am on the same boat in the same piece of water doing the same thing. It made me an absolute nervous wreck. What I wasn't confident enough to know was that my boat was fine and I didn't need to worry. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just slow down a little bit because it's a bit scary. And it's not always life-threatening. Sometimes it's just really bad news. This was my mainsail. Now, for a sailing yacht, the mainsail is the engine of the boat. That's how we're going to move. This should be a beautiful aerodynamic piece of cloth that's worth a fortune. What I had is a beautiful piece of cloth that decided to turn into confetti halfway around the world. And every time I did a manoeuvre, I tacked the boat or I reduced my sail, I had this shower of confetti leaving the back of the boat. Beautiful, but not quite as aerodynamic as when I started. I spent weeks trying to fix this, thinking that this was going to be the end of my race if I didn't fix it. And I even got to the point where I cut a 6 metre by 4 metre area of cloth from another sail and stuck it onto that one to fill the gap. Now, my first sticking didn't really do much, and it kind of peeled away and flew away. So I went for another one. I tried resin, I tried Sikaflex, I tried glue, I tried medical staples that I had in my medical kit. I tried everything. In the end, it was like a carry-on film. Needle and thread. I went in one side, I ran around the mast, pulled it out the side. Went in one side, ran around the mast. 3 hours I was doing this, and I thought, God, if anybody could see me, it would be so embarrassing. And then they say to me, oh, did you video it? I was a little bit busy running around my mast. It was the most exercise I had. But one thing I would say, obviously not the best advert for North Sails, but one thing I would say is those fibres are amazing, because we decided, after maximum effort from myself, that I should just try and sail the boat as well as I can, and if the main falls down, then we'll deal with it then. So I sailed with this string vest of mine, And I got to the finish line, and in fact, it's quite aerodynamic, because normally when there's too much wind, you have to make the sail smaller. I just had holes for the wind to go through. Brilliant, it saved loads of effort, I'll tell you. And quite impressive. And however, the photos at the finish line have like lots of aircraft and other boats that you can see through the sail that really shouldn't be there. And I remember finishing thinking, oh wow, you know, and everyone's looking. And everyone was like, oh, look, there she is. Wow, look at her sail. I was thinking, no, look at me. But no, they were fascinated at this string vest that had got around the world. So there's some things that you can do stuff about, and there's some things that are completely beyond your control. Structural repairs. Now, this is where, as a solo sailor, you become a jack of all trades, and you try to become a master of some of them as well, but it can't always guarantee it. I carry an awful lot of stuff around the world with me, stuff that I often hope I'll never need. One of them is a carbon fibre repair box. My boat is carbon fibre and I really don't want it to break, so I really don't want to have to use it and fix it. This is a ballast tank, so I fill tanks with water to keep the boat stable and fast. And what I managed to do was fill the whole of the sail locker with water, because it had a big crack in it and all the water came out. So I had this like tidal wave going on inside the boat. Quite cool, it's a bit of a jacuzzi, but not quite dynamic for speed. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just pump it out and not use it. In my mind, I thought that was okay. So I just checked with my project manager. I gave him a phone call. And I said, oh, my ballast tank at the front's got a massive split in it and all the water's come out, and so I just won't use it. And he said, that's actually structural. That's keeping the boat together. So, I really should work on my yacht design knowledge. So the bad news was, there I was in the tropics, and it's always in the tropics. So there I was in the tropics sanding carbon fibre. Now, if anybody's worked with carbon fibre, it gets everywhere and it's really, really itchy. So I didn't know whether to wear loads of clothes and seal myself up, or kind of just go for it and do it all and then shower all the carbon fibre bits off. I kind of did half and half and just got carbon fibre everywhere. But I did do a repair. Wasn't a pretty job, probably won't get me a boat building apprentice, but it did the job and got to the finish line. So it's kind of one of those things where you're like, oh, now I'm into this box, what do I do now? And it's just a case of following instructions, because there's no way I'd be a carbon fibre expert, but I can do what I'm told when I need to, when I need to depend on it. There's also stuff that's completely beyond our control, no matter how much homework we put into it. And the weather is an ongoing topic that I study all the time. We get amazing information now, and we have amazing electronics that can convert it all and tell you what the best way to sail is. But ultimately, you have to deal with it. And so you know roughly in the Atlantic what side of a system you want to be, how to get the best weather. The problem is when you're somewhere like Cape Horn, where you're a little restricted in where you can go. This big depression, this is a big depression, and all the purple and black bits just to the top is really quite miserable weather. That was recorded as being 85 miles an hour across Tierra del Fuego. Now, for the first time ever, the Vendée Globe Race Committee told 3 of us to stop. So we're racing around the world, we're racing against our fellow competitors, and 3 of us are told to hang out at Cape Horn and not go into that weather. Now that was really hard to get your head around. And we're all chatting to each other. We'd been talking to each other for about 3 days because we could see this weather forecast coming. And it was like, do you think we can outrun it? Do you think we could? Do you think it's going to be as bad as you think? And you kind of want to go, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then you think, oh no. And also I had my sail like a string vest by then. So I was like, that will never survive. And we were told to wait by the bottom at Cape Horn and wait for the worst of the weather to go. And then we could move on. And it's never happened before in an offshore race. They've never, ever told boats to stop racing or to wait for the weather system. I'm pretty glad we did wait, because we saw 55 knots, and that is a big difference to 85. And from there, the race was on then, because obviously 3 of us were really close. And the race was on up the Atlantic. The other thing that's beyond our control is ice. In the southern hemisphere, there's really good ice knowledge now. The green blobs are all the icebergs that were seen on one of my trips around the world. That's a lot of ice, and it's actually moving further north. So people ask about global warming and the effects, and all I can say is that big chunks of Antarctica are breaking off, and they're travelling a lot further north. We're seeing it because we have satellite coverage that runs just ahead of the fleet, so we could see where the big icebergs are. And also you have comments from the other boats. Now, the first time I went around the world on my own, when I went the wrong way round, I saw my first iceberg. Now, I was in a 45-ton steel tank. I was quite happy to see an iceberg. Took the video, took the photos, told my mum. It was really cool. 3 days later, I was still amongst icebergs, and the novelty had worn off. I hadn't slept, I hadn't eaten, and I was thinking, God, I never want ice in my drinks, I never want to see ice again. And so now, in a carbon fibre boat doing 30 knots, where if you hit an iceberg, it's the end of everything, I really don't want to see ice anymore. So when you see this kind of volume of ice, it's incredible, because you're all pushing to go south, because the shortest distance is the furthest south you can go, because you get round the bottom of the world quicker and then you can come back up. So they're having to put gates in to keep us away from the danger, and as the ice moves, those gates move as well. So it puts us in very different weather, but I, for one, am quite happy to avoid the ice. I remember speaking to Sam Davies, and I said, Sam, you're going really close to that ice position that, you know, has been recorded. She went, yeah, I know, but I haven't seen one. I want to take a picture. I said, just do me a favour. Once you take the picture, just drive out of the way, will you? It's not an easy thing to do, but it doesn't put us off. And last year I went around the world again, and but this was very different. This time it's intense emotionally going around the world, and this time I was going around the world two-handed. The sting in the tail was the sponsor was Spanish, and the co-skipper came with the sponsor. So I had to make a decision whether I wanted to go around the world enough to not have the decision in who I was sailing with. And it's like a marriage, but really intense. I hadn't actually chosen my other half, and you couldn't actually leave each other because you can't get off or have a rest. You're kind of stuck in this 60-foot shell. Love it, hate it, every emotion you can think of, intense emotional roller coaster. So I was with a Spanish sailor, Ana Corbella. So 2 different languages, 2 different ways of thinking, 2 different likes of food. We had a lot of ham on board. And we set off from Barcelona non-stop around the world. This was to be my 3rd lap. Her previous experience was 1 transatlantic. So a real difference in experience levels, and I had to decide if it was something I wanted to do. 102 days, so it's quicker on your own. 102 days we sailed back, still married, not divorced, although I haven't sailed with her since. But we sailed back happily 6th place again. It must be something about the number 6. But she then became the first Spanish woman to sail non-stop around the world, which was huge to be able to have been in that position myself and then enable somebody else to do it. Was really cool, and I loved that. But a massively different dynamic sailing with another person. And actually it taught me to listen. And I know it's really hard to believe with me talking at you, but to have somebody with new ideas or a different way of thinking or fresh. And I was thinking, no, it's my boat and I do it this way, and we do it like, oh, really? And suddenly you think, well, yeah, no, that's quite good. And to take on board external ideas was actually a massive lesson for me, and I'm very grateful that I went through that. So what do I do now? I came back from Spain in May last year, and for me now that's the end of the sponsorship, but I still have a major passion to keep pushing myself. As Livermore lectures say, never give up. I'm not giving up on finding sponsorship and getting back out there, but I'm trying to keep myself busy and sailing as many different boats with as many different people as possible. And last year's Fastnet race was probably a major highlight of mine. I was on a 70-foot trimaran with the French. It's always the French. But we're with the French, Fastnet race. We left Sunday morning. I was back at home in my own bed by Monday night. 34 hours. I was watching the race on the tracker on my computer at home. So I've been spoiled. I don't think I can ever do the Fastnet race again unless I can do it that fast. But it was amazing. And I was physically done. I couldn't even wash my hair in the shower the next day. My arms hurt so much. But it was just amazing to travel at that kind of speed and on those boats was very cool, it has to be said. And then in the winter last year, I had another exciting adventure and I was asked to push boundaries again. And this time, something that I knew nothing about. But there was a group of us asked, and actually Mary Rook is here, wave at the back, Mary. She was with me on this. We were asked to get the first Arab women to sail offshore. Now, these girls had never even swam before the beginning of October or stepped foot on a boat, and we were to race them around the Middle East against some pretty impressive international crews. So we had quite a steep learning curve, and actually just getting them to realise that they can actually sweat and work hard in the gym was a whole different side. The sailing was one thing, but the physical pushing and the nutrition and everything that then is a knock-on effect was the whole learning curve with these girls. And it wasn't just a day trip, because everybody assumed that, oh, they'll just go for a little sail, that's quite nice. It was full on, 9 identical one design boats, international crews. Some of the French guys that have been sailing these boats for years were there. And they also had Omani male teams as well, so they were competing with their male counterparts and desperate to do a good job. And they did, they beat them all. They came fourth, we lost to the French again. But it was amazing to see the transformation. And for us, our job was done because they finished. Nobody knew if they were going to see it through, if they were going to like it or ever want to step foot on a boat again. And they actually finished wanting more and wanting to do more and loved it. And so it was like ticking the box, job done. It was awesome. And I'm really confident that they will go on and do more, and we'll probably be back out there developing that as we go. But a whole new learning curve for us, learning about culture and tradition and being sensitive to make sure what they were doing was accepted and supported by their families and peers. Otherwise, that would have just been the end. And it's like groundbreaking stuff for these Arab women to go out there and go and do something as crazy as this. So it was really cool and very exciting to do, and a very different part of the world to do it in as well. But when I'm back in the UK, I'm very proud to be an ambassador for the charity Toe in the Water. And quite funnily, we don't have a lot of toes in the group. What Toe in the Water do is they take the injured service personnel from Iraq, Afghanistan, all those injured in theatre, who go to rehabilitation at Headley Court, and part of their rehabilitation is to come out competitive sailing with us. And nothing is adapted, it's not disabled sailing. This is when the guys don't even know they're disabled. So then they're still injured, they haven't got to terms with what's wrong with them. And they're on a regular boat, not adapted at all, and they're beasted because what they're missing is being part of a team and being part of a unit that's asked to perform, because that's what they signed up to. They sign up to do a job and deliver. And suddenly we put them, we're all in the same gear, we all wear the same stuff, and we expect them to do a job, and unless they do the job, the whole thing breaks down. And it's right back to what they know and what they are doing, and it's massively humbling. You know, I'm there thinking, wow, these guys are amazing, and they just want more of it. And what they're enjoying is not having the sympathy, but actually just being told to get on with it. And if they can't do it, get out of the way and let someone else do it. Because it's all about the performance of the boat. And for them to beat their able-bodied peers on the water and then go to the dock at the end of the day and have their wheelchairs or their crutches or their prosthetic legs put on as they come off the pontoon against the guys that they beat is very cool. So I enjoy doing that, and we get a lot of exciting racing out of that. And it's all about them adapting to the challenge and not the challenge adapting to them, a little bit like life. So I do enjoy that, but I often have to remember what it is I've done and who I am, and keep me motivated while I'm trying to go through all the no's until I find somebody to say yes to fund the next project. And so on average, there's been about 500 astronauts that have voyaged into space. And there's about 270 people that have circumnavigated the globe. There's a few more now that's being added to. We've got a few races on that have got some new circumnavigators on. 60 people approximately have circumnavigated the globe non-stop, and 5 people have gone the wrong way around the world non-stop. 3 of the wrong way around lot have gone the right way as well, but only one of them's a woman, and that's me, and that's why I'm here talking to you today.